I didn't see it coming on a radar. I felt it in the tracks of my excavator. That's something people don't understand about dirt. Most folks think the ground is just the ground. Solid. Permanent. You park your car on it, you build your house on it, and you assume it's going to stay right where you left it. I know better. My name is Eli Vance. I've been moving earth for 15 years. I run a small excavation and hardscaping company out of the Snoqualmie Valley. I dig foundations, I grade driveways, and I build retaining walls. I know the difference between glacial till and sandy loam. I know about hydrostatic pressure and shear strength. I know that the earth isn't solid. It's just a thick skin over something else. And when you add enough water, that skin dissolves. You probably saw the news reports. They called it an atmospheric river event, a 1,000-year storm. The meteorologists used all those fancy graphics with the red swirls to tell everyone to stay inside. But they missed the point. They were looking at the sky. They should have been looking down. Because when the water didn't stop, the ground didn't just wash away. It changed. It became something permeable. Something navigable. I'm recording this because I need people to know that the disappearances weren't just landslides. The houses that slid into the valley floor didn't just collapse. They were pulled. It started on a Tuesday in November. And it started with a job I should have walked away from. I was up on Tiger Mountain, working a job for a guy named Mr. Henderson. New money. Tech money. He'd bought a plot of land that was mostly steep grade and scenic views, and he'd slapped a 3-story glass and steel modern monstrosity right on the edge of the slope. My job was the retaining wall. The previous contractor had botched the drainage, and Henderson's backyard was starting to slump. If you don't manage the water behind a wall, the water manages the wall. It builds up pressure until, pop, 4 tons of concrete and mud end up in the living room. I was in the cab of my Kubota KX040, that's a 5-ton excavator, trying to cut a new bench into the hillside so we could lay down geogrid and fresh drainage rock. The rain had already started. It was that classic northwest grey drizzle, the kind that soaks you to the bone without ever feeling heavy. I had the heater on in the cab, the wipers slapping back and forth. My foreman, Silence, was down in the trench. His name wasn't actually Silence, it was Silas, but the joke stuck because the kid never shut up. He was 22, strong as an ox, and currently waving his arms at me to hold up. I let off the joystick. The hydraulics hissed as the boom stopped. I slid the window open. The smell of wet fir needles and diesel exhaust blew in. "What's the problem, see?" I yelled over the engine. Silas wiped mud off his safety glasses. "Ground's getting spongy, boss. I'm stepping in it and the water's bubbling up around my boots. We haven't even hit the clay layer yet." I frowned. We were only 3 feet down. It shouldn't be holding water like that. Check the relief pipe. Is it clogged? Clean as a whistle. It's coming from everywhere, Eli. The slope is weeping. Weeping. That's an excavation term. It means water is bleeding out of the face of the cut. A little weeping is normal. This looked like the hill was sweating. I looked up at the sky. The clouds were low, dark bruises scraping the tops of the Douglas firs. The forecast said we had a window of light rain before the main system hit that night. I wanted to get the first course of ecology blocks set before the deluge. If we left this trench open overnight with heavy rain, the whole backyard could slide. "Throw the filter fabric down," I yelled. "We get the rock in, we get the base course set. We don't stop for lunch." Silas gave me a thumbs up, though he looked worried. He grabbed the roll of heavy black fabric and started kicking it out along the trench. I went back to the controls. I could feel the machine shift slightly. Not a slide, just a settle. The tracks were sinking. I engaged the travel levers and moved back 2 feet, getting onto the gravel pad we'd laid for the machine. Even through the steel chassis of the excavator, the ground felt nervous. By 2 p.m., the light rain had turned into a hammering downpour. You couldn't see the valley floor below us anymore. It was just a wall of white mist. Mr. Henderson came out onto his patio. He was wearing a slicker that probably cost more than my weekly payroll. He held an umbrella that was useless in the wind. He waved me over. I powered down the machine, which I hated doing because diesel engines like to stay warm, and hopped out. My boots hit the mud with a wet suck sound. It was ankle-deep already in the flat areas. "Vance!" Henderson shouted over the wind. "My driveway is flooding. The drains by the garage aren't keeping up." "Sir, your drains are fine," I told him, wiping rain out of my eyes. "The issue is the volume. The ground is saturated. The water has nowhere to go." "Well, fix it," he snapped. "I'm not paying you to play in the mud while my Porsche floods." I took a breath. Dealing with clients is harder than dealing with rocks. "Mr. Henderson, I'm trying to keep your backyard from sliding into the ravine. The driveway is secondary. If this wall doesn't get set..." A crack of thunder cut me off. It wasn't the sharp crack of lightning. It was a dull, rolling boom that seemed to come from inside the mountain. The ground vibrated. Henderson looked down at his feet. What was that? Earthquake? No, I said, my stomach tightening. That was a tree coming down. A big one. Probably further up the slope. I looked up the hill, past his house. The forest was dense there, second-growth timber. The trees were thrashing in the wind. But something looked wrong with the tree lean. It looked lower. "Silas!" I screamed toward the trench. "Get out of the hole! Now!" Silas didn't argue. He knew my tone. He scrambled up the muddy bank, slipping, grabbing roots. "Pack it up," I ordered. "Leave the blocks. Leave the fabric. We're getting the equipment to the upper pad, and we're leaving." "But the wall," Henderson started. "Forget the wall." I turned on him. "Look at the water, Henderson. Look at the color." The water running down his paved driveway wasn't clear anymore. It wasn't even brown. It was gray. Slate gray. "So, that's deep silt," I said. "That's not surface runoff. That's coming from deep down. The hill is liquefying from the inside out." I ran back to the excavator. My plan was to track it up the driveway to the street level, park it on the asphalt, and get the hell out in my truck. I climbed into the cab and cranked the key. The diesel roared to life. I spun the house, the top part of the excavator, around to face the slope so I could climb. That's when I saw it. About 50 yards down the slope, below where we were working, the ground just opened. It wasn't a sinkhole. It was like a ripple in a pond, but made of earth. A section of the hillside, maybe 20 feet wide, turned into liquid soup instantly. A massive fir tree, probably 80 feet tall, didn't fall over. It sank. It went straight down, standing upright. 1 second it was there. The next, the earth swallowed it whole. Branches and all. I froze. I've seen slides. I've seen rotational failures where the earth slumps. I have never, in 15 years, seen dirt turn into water and suck a tree down vertically. "Boss!" Silas was screaming from the patio. He was pointing down the hill. The slurry, the mix of mud and rock, was bubbling. It wasn't just displacing, it was churning. I slammed the travel levers forward. The excavator tracks clawed at the mud. I needed to get up the grade. The machine groaned, slipping, sliding sideways. The incredible weight of the counterweight swung me toward the edge. Come on, I muttered, feathering the bucket to pull myself up. It's a technique called walking the hoe. You reach out with the boom, dig the bucket into the ground, and pull the machine forward while the tracks spin. I stabbed the bucket into the driveway asphalt, tearing it up, hooking the solid road base underneath. I pulled. The machine lurched up onto the flat area near the garage. I killed the engine and jumped out. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Get in the truck!" I yelled to Silas. Silas was already running for my Chevy Silverado. "Wait!" Henderson grabbed my arm. "You can't leave. The house. Your house is on a slab, Henderson. If the ground goes, the house goes. You need to come with us. My wife is inside. She's packing a bag." I looked at the road. The driveway led up a steep curve to the main county road. But as I looked, I saw the asphalt at the top of the driveway buckle. It heaved upward, cracking like a piece of dry chocolate, and then slid sideways. The road was gone. A wall of grey mud, roots, and pieces of someone else's fence slid across the only exit. We were cut off. Damn it! I kicked the tire of the truck. "Silas, kill the engine. We aren't going anywhere." We were trapped on Henderson's property, a 3-acre island of expensive landscaping surrounded by a disintegrating mountain. We retreated into the garage. It was a massive 4-car space, heated, with polished concrete floors. It felt safe, solid. But I knew better. Concrete is only as strong as what's under it. Henderson's wife, a terrified woman named Clara, was sitting on a toolbox, clutching a cat carrier. Silas was pacing, trying to get a signal on his phone. "Lines are down," Silas said, voice shaking. "I got no service. No 5G. Nothing. Power's out too," Henderson said. He was trying to act calm, the master of his domain, but his hands were shaking as he held a flashlight. The generator should have kicked on. Why didn't the generator kick on? "Probably because the gas line sheared," I said, walking to the garage door. I hit the manual release and lifted it just a crack, propping it open with a piece of 2x4 so we could see out but keep the rain out. I lay on my stomach and peered under the door. The rain was torrential now. It sounded like gravel being thrown against the roof. The driveway where my excavator sat was running with that grey sludge. And the smell. That's what hit me next. Usually, a slide smells like pine sap and wet dirt. This smelled ancient. It smelled like sulphur, rotten eggs, and something metallic, like old copper pipes. It was the smell of the deep earth, stuff that hadn't seen air in 10,000 years. "Eli," Silas whispered. He was crouching next to me. "Look at the excavator." I squinted into the rain. The Kubota was parked on the edge of the pavement. The floodlights were off, but a bolt of lightning lit up the yard for a split second. The mud around the tracks wasn't settling. It was vibrating. "Is the engine running?" Silas asked. "No. I have the keys in my pocket." We watched. The heavy steel tracks, which weigh tons, were sinking, but not evenly. Something was under them. Thump. We felt it through the garage floor. A heavy, dull impact. Thump. "The ground is moving," Henderson whispered from behind us. "No," I said, my voice barely audible. "Something is hitting the machine." I grabbed a high-beam flashlight from my belt. I always carry an LED tactical light, and shined it out into the yard. The beam cut through the rain. It hit the side of the excavator. The mud next to the machine rippled. A mound rose up, maybe 3 feet high, thick and viscous. It looked like a wave cresting, but it didn't crash. It held its shape. Then, for just a second, the mud parted. I saw something pale, a flash of something slick and segmented, like the underside of a giant grub, or the belly of a deep-sea fish. It was thick, maybe the size of a telephone pole, and it slammed against the side of the excavator track. Clang. Metal rang out. The 5-ton machine slid 6 inches sideways. "Did you see that?" Silas hissed, grabbing my shoulder so hard it hurt. "What the hell was that?" "It's a root ball," Henderson said frantically. "Just tension in a root ball snapping." I turned off the light. "Root balls don't recoil," I said. We backed away from the garage door. I pulled the 2x4 and let the door slam shut, locking the latch. "We need to get upstairs," I said. "2nd floor." "Now." "Why?" Clara asked, hugging the cat. "Because," I said, looking at the polished concrete floor that suddenly felt very thin. "Whatever is out there, it's swimming, and I don't think the concrete is going to stop it if it decides to come up for air." We scrambled up the stairs into the main house. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the apocalypse. The valley below was gone. It was just a churning river of grey. But as I watched the darkness, I saw the lights of a house further down the hill flicker and go out. And then I heard the sound. Not the wind, not the rain. It was a grinding noise, like 2 stones being rubbed together, amplified 1,000 times. It was coming from everywhere. It was the sound of the earth chewing on itself. We were trapped, and the tide was rising. We sat in the dark. That's the thing about modern architecture. It's beautiful when the sun is shining and the power is on. Henderson's living room was all open concept, vaulted ceilings and floor-to-ceiling glass facing the valley. But at night, in a storm, glass isn't a window. It's a mirror. We couldn't see out. The rain was sheeting so hard against the panes it looked like running oil. All we could see were our own reflections huddled around a battery-powered lantern Silas had dug out of his backpack. Just 4 pale, distorted faces floating in the black glass. And we were freezing. Without the furnace, the house was losing heat fast. The dampness was seeping through the walls, that cold, wet chill that settles in your joints. Henderson was pacing. He was trying to call 911 again. "Still nothing," he muttered, tossing his phone onto the designer sofa. "This is ridiculous. It's 2024. How do we not have a signal?" "Towers need power," Silas said quietly. He was sitting on the floor, back against the wall, knees pulled to his chest. "And if the towers are on the slopes, they're probably gone." "Don't say that," Clara snapped. She was shivering, the cat carrier on her lap. "They aren't gone. They're just down." I ignored them. I was listening to the house. You learn to listen to structures when you build them. You learn the difference between a house settling because of temperature changes, pop, creak, and a house that is twisting. This house was screaming. Every few minutes, a sharp crack would echo through the drywall. That was the framing lumber shearing under torque. Then a low moan, like a cello string being tightened until it snaps. That was the steel I-beams flexing. "Eli," Silas whispered, crawling over to me. "The floor is slanted." I looked at him. I know. I put my water bottle down, he said, pointing to a Nalgene rolling slowly across the hardwood. It rolled toward the back wall, toward the hill. That was bad. If we were tilting toward the hill, it meant the foundation wasn't sliding down the slope yet. It meant the earth was being eaten away from underneath the uphill side. We were being undercut. "We need to move the weight," I said, standing up. My knees popped. "Everyone, move to the center of the room. Stay away from the windows. Stay away from the fireplace." "Why the fireplace?" Henderson asked. "Because it's masonry," I said. "It's heavy. If the floor joists give, that stone chimney is going to act like an anchor and pull this whole section down." We huddled in the center of the room on a plush rug that probably cost more than my truck. And we waited. It happened at 3:14 a.m. I know the time because I checked my watch right after the sound. We had all drifted into that half-sleep you get in emergencies, where your body shuts down but your brain is still wired to a car battery. The sound came from below us, from the garage. It wasn't a crash. It was a burst. Imagine filling a balloon with water until it pops, but the balloon is made of 6 inches of reinforced concrete. It was a wet, heavy explosion. The floor beneath us jumped. Clara screamed. Henderson scrambled up, knocking the lantern over. The light spun, casting crazy shadows of table legs and chairs against the walls. "What was that?" Henderson yelled. "Did the boiler blow?" "No," I said, grabbing the lantern and steadying it. "That was the slab. The garage floor just gave way." I ran to the stairwell door, the one that led down to the garage and the lower foyer. I put my hand on the handle. It was vibrating. "Eli, don't," Silas warned. I cracked the door open an inch. The smell hit me instantly. It was stronger now. That rotten egg sulfur stench, mixed with the copper tang of wet iron. But underneath that, there was a new smell. Musk. Something oily and pungent, like a nest of snakes turned inside out. And the sound. Slap. Slap. Slide. It sounded like wet leather being dragged across concrete. I shined the flashlight through the crack, aiming down the stairs. The bottom of the staircase was gone. The water was there, dark, grey, churning sludge rising up the bottom 3 steps. But the water wasn't level. It was heaving. Something large was thrashing in the foyer. I saw a flash of movement, a grey shape, thick as a thigh, whipping against the drywall. It smashed through the plaster like it was wet paper. Crunch. I slammed the door and locked the deadbolt. I backed away, chest heaving. "What is it?" Clara whispered. "Is it the water?" "It's inside," I said. "The water is inside." "But—" I looked at Silas. I needed him to understand, but I didn't want to break the Hendersons yet. "Silas, grab the furniture. We're barricading this door." "Barricading." Henderson stepped forward, his face red in the lantern light. "Against a flood? Vance, water doesn't care about a sofa. It's not just water." I roared at him. I lost my cool. I admit it. I was terrified. "Did you hear that sound? Water doesn't slither, Henderson. Water doesn't smash drywall." I grabbed the heavy oak sideboard near the wall. "Silas, help me." We dragged the heavy cabinet in front of the door. Then the sofa. Then the heavy dining table. We built a wall against the stairs. From behind the door, we heard a heavy impact. Thud. The wood of the door groaned against the deadbolt. Thud. Something was testing the door. "Oh, God!" Clara whimpered. clutching the cat carrier so tight her knuckles were white. "Someone is down there." "Not someone," I said grimly. We backed away to the far side of the room. The banging stopped after a minute. Then we heard the scratching. It sounded like metal claws on wood. Or maybe teeth. We needed to see. The not knowing was eating us alive. "Henderson," I said, keeping my voice low. "You have a security system, right? Cameras." "Yes," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "But the power is out. The hub is dead." "What about outside lights? Motion sensors? Are any of them battery backup?" "No. Everything is hardwired." I cursed. We were blind. Then I remembered my bag. I had my inspection scope, a rigid snake camera I use for checking drain pipes. It's got a small screen and a light on the end of a flexible 3-foot cable. "Silas, hold the lantern." I went to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the driveway. The rain was still hammering the glass. I couldn't see anything. "I need to open this," I said. "Are you crazy?" Henderson hissed. "The wind will blow the roof off. Just a crack. I need to see what's happening to the foundation." I unlocked the sliding glass door. The wind pressure fought me, trying to suck the door open. I braced my boot against the frame and slid it open just 4 inches. The roar of the storm filled the room. Rain sprayed in, cold and violent. I leaned out, shielding my eyes. I pointed my tactical flashlight down toward the garage area. The beam struggled to cut through the rain. At first, I just saw mud. The driveway was gone. The yard was a lake of gray slurry. Then the lightning flashed again. A long, sustained sheet of lightning that lit up the whole valley for 3 seconds. In that light, I saw the truth. The hill wasn't just sliding. It was boiling. The mud was alive. Everywhere I looked, near the submerged excavator, near the ruins of the retaining wall, near the garage door, the surface of the mud was breaking. I saw them. They looked pale, like raw chicken meat that had been soaked in water for a week. They were segmented, ringed like earthworms, but they were huge. 6, maybe 7 feet long. Some were thicker. They didn't have eyes. They had these ends. Just a tapered, blunt head that seemed to vibrate. And they were swimming through the liquefied soil as easily as a trout swims in a river. One of them was coiled around the hydraulic arm of my excavator. It was constricting. I watched as the steel hydraulic line snapped under the pressure, spraying fluid into the rain. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. Then I looked directly down, at the base of the house. The foundation wasn't failing because of the water. They were eating it. I saw 3 of them huddled against the concrete stem wall of the house. They were grinding against it. I could hear that sound again. Scritch, crunch, grind. They were using the liquefaction to burrow under the footer, chewing through the soil stability, turning the hardpan into soup. They were bringing the house down on purpose. I pulled back inside and slammed the door shut, locking it. I leaned my forehead against the cold glass, gasping for air. "Eli," Silas asked, "what is it?" I turned to them. I had to tell the truth. If we didn't understand the threat, we died. "They're worms," I said. "Or something like them. Giant, deep earth feeders." Henderson laughed. A brittle, hysterical bark of a laugh. "Worms? You're telling me giant worms are attacking my house?" "I'm telling you the atmospheric river saturated the ground deep enough to wake something up," I said, grabbing his shoulders. "Henderson, listen to me. They thrive in the slurry. The mud is their water. And right now, this house is a rock sitting in their pond. They're trying to sink it. Why? Clara asked softly. She had set the cat carrier down. She looked numb. Why would they want to sink the house? I looked at the floor, thinking about the vibrations, thinking about the garage door. Vibration, I said. Worms hunt by vibration. Rain hits the ground, it creates noise. But a house full of people walking, generators humming, pipes rattling? To them, we're the dinner bell. I looked at the barricaded door. We need to stop moving, I whispered. We need to turn off everything. The lantern, the phones. We need to be lighter than air. The house groaned again. A long, sickening tilt. The Nalgene bottle rolled faster across the floor this time, hitting the wall with a thwack. From downstairs, behind the barricade, the scratching stopped. Then, a new sound. A wet, sucking noise. Like a boot being pulled out of deep mud. But it was coming from inside the walls. "They're in the plumbing," Silas whispered, his eyes wide with horror. "Eli, the soil pipe is 4 inches wide. If they can squeeze." I looked at the bathroom door off the hallway. The atmospheric river wasn't stopping. The ground was getting softer by the minute, and we were trapped in a glass box that was slowly sinking into a nest of things that had been hungry for a very, very long time. "Nobody go into the bathroom," I said. "And nobody make a sound." We sat in the dark, and we listened to the things swimming in the walls. We froze. Have you ever listened to a plumbing system in an old house? You hear the water rushing, the pipes ticking as they expand with heat. It's familiar. It's the sound of a functioning home. But this was the sound of invasion. It started as a gurgle in the kitchen island sink, which was right in the middle of the open-concept living room. A wet, thick burp of air. Bloop. Then came the smell. It wafted up from the drain, that sulphur and musk again, concentrated now. "Eli," Silas whispered, his voice trembling so hard I could barely hear him. "The toilet." He was pointing toward the powder room near the stairs. The door was open. I looked at the toilet. The water in the bowl was receding. It wasn't being flushed. It was being sucked down. It swirled violently, emptying the bowl, leaving just the dry porcelain. Then, a second later, the water shot back up. It geysered out, black and oily, splashing onto the tile floor. "Plug it," I hissed. "What?" Henderson stared at me. "The soil pipe," I whispered, pointing at the bathroom. "It's a 4-inch ABS line that goes straight down through the slab and into the septic field. If they are in the mud, they are in the septic tank. And if they are in the tank—" I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't have to. I grabbed a heavy throw pillow from the couch. "Silas, get the kitchen towels. Everything you can find. We need to jam the drains." I ran into the powder room. I knew I was violating my own rule about movement and vibration, but if we didn't seal the system, we were going to have visitors. I shoved the pillow into the toilet bowl. It didn't fit well. Something heavy. I waved at Henderson. "Give me the bust." Henderson had this ridiculous bronze bust of, I think it was Julius Caesar, on a pedestal in the hallway. He grabbed it, staggering under the weight, and handed it to me. I jammed the pillow down and slammed the heavy bronze head on top of it. It wedged into the bowl. Thump. Something hit the underside of the toilet trap. The porcelain vibrated against my hand. Thump. "Hold it down," I told Henderson. Don't let up. I ran to the kitchen sink. Silas was already there, shoving a wad of dish towels into the drain. It's pushing back, boss. Silas grunted, pressing his weight onto the drain stopper. There's pressure. It's pneumatic pressure, I said, grabbing a heavy cast-iron skillet from the hanging rack. They're moving through the pipes like pistons. They're compressing the air ahead of them. I placed the skillet over the drain and then piled every heavy cookbook I could find on top of it. We stood back, breathing hard. The house was silent again, except for the rain and the groaning of the timber. But now, every drain in the house was a loaded gun. The bathtub upstairs, the master shower, the laundry room utility sink. A modern house has 20 penetrations into the earth. We were sitting on top of a sieve. We huddled back in the center of the living room. Time became a blur of adrenaline and exhaustion. I checked my watch. 4:45 a.m. The sun wouldn't be up for another 3 hours, given the storm clouds. The angle of the floor was getting worse. The Nalgene bottle from earlier was now pinned against the baseboard on the uphill side. Wait. Uphill? I frowned. Silas. Look at the bottle. Silas squinted. It rolled the other way. My blood ran cold. We aren't tilting toward the slide anymore. We're tilting back. Is that good? Clara asked, hope in her voice. No, I said. It means the foundation on the downhill side, the side facing the drop, has completely detached. The house is pivoting. We're hanging off the edge of the liquid earth like a diving board. As if the house heard me, the floor dropped. It wasn't a slide. It was a lurch. The entire structure dropped 2 feet in a heartbeat. Crash. The glass wall facing the valley, the big, beautiful million-dollar view, couldn't take the torque. The tempered glass exploded. It didn't shatter into shards. It crumbled into millions of tiny cubes, raining down onto the hardwood. The wind roared into the room instantly, carrying rain, leaves, and the smell of the slide. Get back! I screamed, grabbing Clara and pulling her toward the kitchen. With the glass gone, the barrier was gone. We were looking straight out into the void. And in the lightning flashes, I saw the true scale of the disaster. The valley floor wasn't just mud. It was a writhing sea. Hundreds of them. Down in the slurry, I saw the pale, segmented arches of their backs breaching the surface like whales. They were churning the mud, keeping it liquid, preventing it from settling. They were farming the disaster. And they were coming up the hill. They're coming for the house, Silas said, his voice flat. He was in shock. I looked over the edge of the shattered living room floor. The deck was gone. It had sheared off. Below us, the mud was piling up against the exposed basement walls. And then I saw the glowing. It wasn't bioluminescence like a firefly. It was duller. A sick, pale green phosphorescence coming from the friction of their bodies moving through the silica-rich mud. A static charge. One of them reared up. It rose out of the mud right below the open living room. It was massive. The thickness of a rain barrel. It didn't have a face, just that blunt, blind, sensory-loaded head. It swayed back and forth in the rain, sensing the heat leaking out of our broken living room. Back to the hallway, I whispered. Slowly. Henderson was paralyzed. He was staring at the thing, his mouth open. My insurance. He mumbled. Flood insurance doesn't cover pests. Move, Henderson. I grabbed his collar. The worm lunged. It didn't bite. It slammed. It brought its upper body down on the exposed floor joists where the window used to be. Crack boom. The impact shook the fillings in my teeth. The floor beneath us buckled. The hardwood splintered upward. The house groaned, a long, dying sound of nails pulling out of wood. We scrambled into the hallway, away from the open air. 55:00, 1 hour and 2 minutes. The breach. We retreated to the master bedroom at the back of the house. It was the only room with a door we could close that was far enough away from the open cliff edge of the living room. "Block the door," I ordered. We shoved a heavy dresser against it. It felt futile. If those things could smash concrete, a particle board door was a joke. But we needed to feel like we were doing something. Clara was crying softly now, rocking the cat carrier. The cat inside was hissing, a low, guttural growl. Animals know. "What do we do?" Silas asked. "Eli, seriously, what do we do? We can't stay here. The house is going to slide down the hill any second." He was right. The house was acting like a sled. Once the friction broke, we'd ride this wreckage all the way to the bottom of the valley, right into the feeding frenzy. "We have to leave," I said. "Leave?" Henderson shouted. "Out there. Did you see those things? If we stay, we get crushed or eaten," I said. "If we go, we have a chance." "Go where?" Silas asked. "The driveway is gone. The road is gone." I closed my eyes and visualized the topography. I tried to remember the job site before the rain. The trench. The retaining wall materials. "The rock pile," I said. "The what?" "The quarry spalls," I said. "The pile of heavy granite rock we had delivered for the drainage layer. It's sitting on the upper pad, near the tool shed. It's huge rock. 4 to 8 inch spalls. Sharp. Heavy. So they can't swim through rock," I said. "Mud?" "Yes." "Silt?" "Yes." "But interlocked, sharp granite? They can't liquefy that. It's a solid island." "It's 50 yards away," Henderson said. "Across the slurry." "We need a bridge," I said. I looked around the master bedroom. I looked at the bed. The mattress. "No," I muttered. "Not buoyant enough." Then I saw it. The renovation materials. Henderson had been remodeling the master bath before the slide. Stacked in the corner were sheets of rigid foam insulation. XPS foam. Pink, 2 inches thick, 4 by 8 sheets. "Insulation," I said. "It floats." "It floats on water," Silas said. "Will it float on mud?" "Mud is denser than water," I said. "Displacement physics. Anything that floats on water floats better on mud. We tape them together. We make rafts. We slide across the surface to the rock pile." "And then what?" Clara asked. "Then we climb the rock pile to the tree line," I said. "The old growth. The trees that haven't fallen yet. Their root systems are locked into the bedrock, not the topsoil. If we can get to the bedrock, we're safe." It was a terrible plan. It was a suicide mission. But the floor under us tilted another 5 degrees, and I heard the drywall in the hallway snap. "We don't have a choice," I said. We grabbed the foam. There were 6 sheets. I had a roll of Gorilla Tape in my pocket. Every contractor does. We taped them into 2 double-thick stacks. 2 people per raft, I said. Distribute the weight. Stay on your knees. Use whatever you can for paddles. We tore the shelves out of the closet to use as oars. Then we had to do the hardest thing. We had to go back out into the hallway. We moved the dresser. The hallway was slanted downhill at a 30-degree angle now. It was like a funhouse slide. At the bottom of the hall, the living room was gone. It was just a jagged mouth opening into the storm. The rain blew in, soaking us instantly. "Okay," I yelled over the wind. "Me and Silas on the first one. Henderson, you and Clara on the second. Tie the rafts together with this." I used an extension cord I found in the bedroom. "We don't get separated." We threw the pink foam sheets onto the floor of the living room. They slid down the hardwood and shot out into the mud beyond the broken edge. They landed with a slap on the grey soup. They bobbed. They didn't sink. "Go! Go!" I screamed. I grabbed Silas and we jumped. It wasn't a graceful exit. We hit the foam hard. The raft dipped, grey sludge washing over the edges. It was cold, freezing, bone-aching cold. And it was thick. It felt like landing in wet concrete. "Paddle!" I roared. I jammed my closet shelf into the muck. It was resistant, heavy. I had to heave with my back muscles to move us inches. "Henderson! Jump!" Henderson and Clara tumbled out of the broken house. They landed on their raft. Clara screamed as the mud splashed her face, but she held onto the cat carrier. We were floating. We were floating 10 feet above where the driveway used to be, suspended on a churning ocean of liquefied earth. Toward the shed. I pointed my tactical light. The beam cut through the rain. The shed was still standing, miraculously, and next to it, the dark, jagged mound of the rock pile. We paddled. Heave. Suck. Heave. Suck. The vibrations of our paddling travelled through the foam, into the mud. I saw the ripples start. To our left, near the submerged excavator, a wake appeared. It was moving fast, converging on us. "Stroke!" I yelled. "Silas, put your back into it." The raft lurched forward. The extension cord between us snapped taut, towing the Hendersons. The wake got closer. A dorsal ridge of pale flesh broke the surface. It was huge, bigger than the ones I'd seen earlier. "It's coming!" Henderson screamed. I didn't look back. I looked at the rock pile. 20 yards. 10 yards. The mud erupted behind us. I felt the wave lift us up. The creature had breached, launching itself out of the slurry to crash down on the rafts. "Jump for the rocks!" I screamed. We hit the edge of the rock pile. The foam raft grounded out on the sharp granite. I scrambled off, slipping on the wet stone, grabbing Silas by the vest and hauling him up. I turned back. The second raft, Henderson's raft, was 5 feet from the edge. The creature crashed down. Not on them, but next to them. The displacement wave flipped their foam sheet. Henderson and Clara went into the soup. You think you know what drowning looks like. You picture splashing, gasping, heads bobbing up and down. Drowning in liquefied soil isn't like that. It's silent. It's sticky. When Henderson and Clara hit the slurry, they didn't sink immediately. The mud was too dense. They stuck halfway, buried to their waists, like flies caught in wet paint. "Help!" Henderson shrieked. He was thrashing, trying to kick his legs to swim. "It's got me. It's pulling. Stop moving!" I screamed from the rock pile. "Henderson, freeze!" But panic is a reflex. You can't turn it off. Henderson was churning the mud, creating shock waves. I saw the surface of the grey soup bulge. It wasn't the raft coming back up. It was the worm. It moved with terrifying speed, cutting a wake through the sludge. It honed in on Henderson's kicking legs. "Clara!" I yelled. "Reach for the cord. The extension cord." The orange cord was still tied to the floating raft, and the end was tangled near the edge of our rock pile. Clara was smarter than her husband. She went still. She was sobbing, shaking violently, but she stopped kicking. She reached out a mud-slicked hand and grabbed the cord. "Silas, pull." I grabbed the line. We heaved. The cord went taut. We dragged Clara through the mud. It made a sucking sound, schluck, as she ploughed through it. "Richard!" she screamed, looking back. Henderson was waist-deep. He saw the worm coming, a pale, blind torpedo of muscle. He didn't scream again. He just dropped. The worm didn't bite him. It undercut him. It swam directly beneath him and destabilized the suspension of the mud. It created a vacuum. Henderson vanished instantly. 1 second he was there, flailing. The next, there was just a hole in the mud that snapped shut with a wet pop. No blood. No debris. Just the earth reclaiming him. "Don't look!" I shouted at Clara as we hauled her up onto the rocks. We dragged her over the sharp granite spalls. Her clothes were torn, her skin grey with silt, but she was alive. She collapsed on the rocks, coughing up mud. "He's gone," Silas whispered, staring at the spot where his boss had been. "It just sucked him down." "We aren't safe here," I said, my voice shaking. "We're on the edge. Move up. Climb the pile." We scrambled up the side of the rock pile. I've never loved a pile of rocks so much in my life. These were quarry spalls, jagged chunks of granite, 4 to 8 inches across. We use them for drainage bases because they lock together. They don't flow. They were sharp. I could feel them cutting into my palms and knees through my Carhartts. But that sharpness meant friction. It meant stability. The worms couldn't liquefy this. They couldn't swim through interlocking granite. We were standing on a fortress. We reached the top of the mound, maybe 15 feet above the slurry lake. The rain was still hammering down, but the wind felt different up here. Cleaner. We huddled together. Me, Silas, and Clara. The cat carrier was gone, lost in the flip. Clara sat with her knees pulled to her chest, rocking back and forth, staring at nothing. "Look," Silas whispered, pointing back toward the house. The lightning flashed again. The house, Henderson's beautiful modern glass box, was moving. It wasn't sliding fast. It was a slow, majestic death. The entire structure had detached from the hillside. It drifted out into the middle of the mud river like a barge. As we watched, the roofline buckled. The structural integrity failed. The house folded in on itself, snapping timber and twisting steel. And then, slowly, gracefully, it began to sink. It didn't sink because it was heavy. It sank because the things underneath it were pulling it down. I could see the mud churning around the foundation, a frenzy of feeding. They were grinding the concrete into dust. In 2 minutes, the house was gone. Just a chimney sticking out of the mud like a tombstone. Then that vanished too. "They ate it," Silas said. "They ate the whole damn house." "They wanted the vibration to stop," I said quietly. "Now it's quiet." We sat there for a long time, just shivering. Hypothermia was setting in. I could feel my thinking getting slow, like syrup. "We can't stay on the rocks," I said, forcing my jaw to work. "We'll freeze to death. We need to get to the trees. The old growth." "Why?" Clara whispered. Her voice was a rasp. "Because the root systems," I said. Douglas firs have taproots. They lock into the fractured bedrock. The worms can't swim through bedrock. If we get to the high ground, the solid ground, we can build a fire. We can survive. The rock pile backed up against the steep slope of the mountain that hadn't slid yet. It was the borrow pit area where we had cut into the hill. "We have to jump," I said, looking at the gap between the rocks and the dirt bank. "It's a 3-foot gap. Below is the mud." "I can't," Clara said. "You have to," I said. I grabbed her arm. It was cold as ice. "Clara, listen to me. Richard is dead. The house is dead. But you are breathing. Do not let the mud win." Something in her eyes hardened. A tiny spark. She nodded. Silas went first. He leaped across the gap, landing on the muddy bank, grabbing a thick root of a maple tree. He hauled himself up. "Come on." He reached his hand out. I grabbed Clara by the back of her vest. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. We jumped. I hit the bank hard, mud slamming into my chest. I felt the earth shift under me, that sickening jelly feeling. "Move! Move!" I scrambled, pushing Clara up. Silas grabbed her arms and yanked her up to the higher ledge. I clawed at the roots, my boots slipping. Something brushed my foot. Not a root. Something wet. I kicked out, screaming. I felt a solid impact against something rubbery. I scrambled up the bank, digging my fingers into the dirt until my nails bled. I rolled over the top of the ledge onto a bed of fern and moss. Solid. It felt different instantly. This wasn't the fill dirt of the construction site. This was the forest floor. The ancient, compacted glacial till. It didn't jiggle. It held. We crawled away from the edge, deeper into the trees, until we couldn't see the mud anymore, until all we could see were the massive, dark trunks of the firs towering over us. We found a hollow under the roots of a fallen cedar, a giant tree that had come down in a storm 50 years ago. The root ball created a roof. It was dry underneath. We crawled inside. It smelled like dry dust and spiders. It was the best smell in the world. We huddled together for body heat. We didn't sleep. We just shook. Eventually, the rain stopped. It didn't taper off. It just quit, like someone turned off a faucet. The silence that followed was deafening. No wind. No grinding rocks. Just the drip, drip, drip of water falling from the canopy. Then, grey light started to filter through the trees. Dawn. I crawled out from under the root ball. My muscles were stiff, locked up with cold. I stood up, leaning against a tree for support. Silas joined me. We walked back to the edge of the tree line to look down. We stood on the precipice of the old world, looking down at the new one. The valley was gone. From our elevation, we could see for miles. The town of Snoqualmie, the river, the roads, everything was erased. It was just a flat, grey expanse of drying mud. It looked like a moonscape. No houses, no power lines, just the tips of a few tall trees sticking out here and there. "It's all gone," Silas whispered. "Everyone." "I don't know," I said. As we watched, the sun broke through a crack in the clouds. It hit the grey mud below, and the surface rippled. Thousands of ripples. They were breaching. Everywhere. Miles of them. The worms were coming to the surface to bask in the warmth, or maybe to breathe. Arches of pale flesh glistening in the morning light. They owned the valley now. I looked at my hands. They were stained with the dirt that had tried to kill me. "We have to hike out," I said. We stick to the ridge lines. We stay on the bedrock. We don't touch the valley floor ever again. Where do we go? Silas asked. East, I said. Toward the pass. Toward the rock. We keep walking until we find ground that doesn't move. I turned back to the forest. Clara was crawling out of the shelter. She looked broken, but she was standing up. The earth had changed. The rules had changed. We weren't the masters of the ground anymore. We were just refugees on the islands of stone. But as I looked at the solid trunks of the trees, I realized something. The earth hadn't betrayed us. We had just forgotten what it was. We forgot that it was alive. And now, we would never forget again. This is Eli Vance, signing off. If you're listening to this, stay on the high ground, and for God's sake, watch your step.